Chapter 50. Joshua now leads Israel. As soon as Moses and Joshua left the tabernacle where God had instructed them concerning the things to come, Moses hurried back to his tent. He was to write down the matters that were to be made into a song to teach to Israel. Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 22. The way to happiness. Later, Moses went before the people to give them the verses that were to become a sort of national anthem to remind the Israelites of their faults, their obligations, and the matters that would come up in the future. The verses mentioned God's perfect justice, mercy, and great works, and also showed how sinful Israel had become in spite of God's wonderful ways. The people were reminded of how patiently God had dealt with them during their travels in the desert, and of the terrible warnings that had repeatedly been given to them. The verses pointed out that if Israel were wise enough to obey, all their enemies would be easily overcome, but that lack of wisdom would result in a great calamity for Israel. It was shown that Israel would have great reason to rejoice in the far future, but only after the people would have undergone a time of terrible tribulation and finally would have repented. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 1 through 43. Don't do what is right in your own eyes, Moses told the people. Your conscience will deceive you. Let it be your ambition, above all things, to observe God's laws and teach your children to do the same. If you fail in this, your lives will become miserable and come to an untimely end. On the other hand, obedience will mean long, happy lives with prosperity and wonderful futures for your children. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 8, chapter 6, verses 1 through 12, chapter 4, verse 30 and 31, chapter 11, verses 8 and 9, and chapter 31, verse 6. Moses then pronounced lengthy blessings upon the various tribes of Israel, at the same time telling some of the things that they would accomplish in the far future. Deuteronomy chapter 33. Moses' departure. Moses ruefully ended talking to the people. He realized that the time had come for him to go to Mount Pisgah to look across the Jordan and view the land of Canaan, which he would never enter. Probably accompanied by Eleazar, Joshua, the elders of Israel, and some of his aides, Moses started out for the mountain, which was not very far away. When the congregation became aware he was leaving forever, the people gradually broke into tearful moans and wails of sorrow. Moses was greatly moved by the loud demonstration, but there was nothing for him to do but go on. A little later he noted that the great mass of people, still wailing, was following him toward the mountain. Moses knew that if the people were not stopped, many of them would follow him right up the mountainside. He hastily took advantage of a small hill from which he could more than easily be seen and heard, to firmly tell as many as could hear him that they should not follow him any further. The crying people obeyed. Moses and those who accompanied him continued on toward Mount Pisgah, a point from which previously Balak, the king of Moab, had tried to get the since-destroyed prophet Balaam to pronounce a curse upon Israel. Silently the group progressed up the mountainside. While the sad wailing of the people drifted up strongly from the plains below, it was a strange fact that while the people were feeling sorry for Moses, Moses was feeling sorry for the people. The people were sorry to see Moses depart from them, and at the same time Moses felt concern for Israel because his close contact with God had resulted in knowing Israel's fate, even into the far future. He knew that the people still had many bitter lessons to learn. When at last Moses and the elders and officers arrived close to the peak of Mount Pisgah, Moses turned to the leaders who had come with him and said a final few words of farewell. There were no dry eyes, even among those men who were hardened soldiers and officers who had long served Moses. Moses said goodbye to each one of them, and then walked alone up to the highest point of the mountain. From there, through the clear atmosphere of the high mountain country, Moses looked across the Jordan and into nearby territory to clearly view the land where most of the tribes of Israel would settle. Moses views the promised land. From that elevation of several thousand feet, one of the highest points in the land, Moses carefully drank in the magnificent sight. He looked to the southwest across the area where the tribes of Simeon, Judah, Dan, and Benjamin were to settle, from the Dead Sea to the Mediterranean. To the northwest he could see the region that was to be occupied by Ephraim, Issachar, and half of Manasseh. To the north he viewed the lands to be taken over by Zebulun, Asher, and Naphtali. Swinging his gaze to the east side of the Jordan, Moses saw the land already allotted to the other half of Manasseh and to the tribes of Gad and Reuben. Below him, stretching from the Dead Sea to the far north, was the beautiful Jordan Valley, with its lush bottom lands filled with fields, vineyards, groves of palm trees, and other fruit. "This is the land," the voice of God came to Moses, "that I promised to give to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Here it is for you to see, but it is not for you to enter. However, you will enter a better land in the future resurrection to come. Now go down the side of the mountain opposite the way you came up." Deuteronomy chapter 34 verses 1 through 4, Hebrews chapter 11 verses 1 through 15, verses 24 through 29, and verses 39 and 40. A final farewell. Having feasted his eyes on the scene around him, Moses switched his gaze back on the mourning elders and officers who gazed up at him sadly. He waved and then turned and strode slowly out of their sight. This was the last that was seen of Moses by human beings. He started down the other side of the mountain, but just how far he went, no one knows. Possibly God caused him to fall into a deep sleep and then took his life peacefully. God then buried him in a nearby mountain valley in Moab. Deuteronomy chapter 34 verses 5 and 6. Satan at one point attempted to obtain possession of Moses' body. Jude verse 9. Probably with the purpose of bringing it to the attention of the Israelites so that they would make it an object of their worship. However, God carefully hid the burial place from man, so that no one would ever be tempted to regard the body as something sacred that should be worshipped. Some listeners might think that it would be a very extreme thing to worship a dead body. But even today, when we are supposed to be enlightened and intelligent, millions of people in the professing Christian world regard the relics, dried bones and shriveled flesh of certain long-dead individuals as something to be revered and considered holy. Thus, Moses' life ended at 120 years, the life of one of God's most outstanding servants of all time. Just before he died, Moses was as healthy and strong as when he was only 80 years of age, and even his eyes were as keen as they had been in his youth. Deuteronomy chapter 34 verse 7. No other leader of Israel accomplished such great deeds as did Moses. Because he was so close to God, he enjoyed the great privilege of leading millions of his people out of slavery and bringing God's wonderful laws to them, and leading them to the entrance of a bountiful garden that was to be their home. Although there were too many times when they ignored God by ignoring Moses, all of Israel was very sad to lose such a wonderful leader, and for the next 30 days matters came to almost a standstill in the camps while the people mourned the loss of Moses. In current times, many people, including a host of outstanding religious leaders, consider the vitally important times and events of ancient Israel only as an old tale having to do with the Jews. They wrongly think of Moses simply as one who, not too successfully, may have led a few Jews out of Egypt and into Canaan, and who started the present Jewish religion. Such wrong beliefs are spawned by the refusal to completely believe Jesus and the Old Testament, and the inability to understand who Israel is today. Moses didn't start the Jewish religion. The word Jews is not even mentioned in the Bible until long after Moses' time. When the Jews were referred to in 2 Kings chapter 16 verse 6, they were at war with Israel. Those who assume that the words Jew and Israelite mean the same thing find it impossible to understand some of the most important parts of the Bible, especially prophecy. It is sad that innumerable people today who sincerely want to learn how best to live are taught by such blind or stubborn leaders that the sacred living laws of God, brought to Israel through Moses, were only Jewish rules blotted out by Christ's death. They are misled to believe that we are now free to do as our conscience pleases. Happily, according to prophecy for these last days, God is gradually opening the understanding of more and more people to the startling fact that those who defiantly teach that God's laws are no longer in force are as guilty in God's sight as the most villainous men mentioned throughout the scriptures. Unless they repent, the fate of such wicked people, referred to as false shepherds, will be one of the most horrible, because of their deceitful posing as true ministers of God. Ezekiel chapter 34 verse 2, verses 7 through 10, and 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 12. God speaks to Joshua. After Moses' death, God contacted Joshua to remind him that now that he was Israel's leader, he should direct himself and the nation to live by all the book of the law of God. He was reminded that trust in the eternal and obedience and courage would mean success in the battles to come over Israel's enemies, and in taking over the land from the Great Sea to the Euphrates River, and from the desert south of the Dead Sea to Mount Lebanon on the north. Deuteronomy chapter 34 verse 9, and Joshua chapter 1 verses 1 through 4. I will not fail you nor forsake you as long as you carry on in according with the laws that came to you through my servant Moses. God instructed Joshua. Deuteronomy chapter 4 verses 30 and 31, Joshua chapter 1 verses 5 through 7. Meditate on those laws so that they will become so familiar to you that you cannot forget them. Be strong in this office that has been given to you. Be of great courage. Don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. Remember that your God is with you wherever you go. This was one of the greatest pep talks ever given to one of the most responsible leaders in all history. If Joshua hadn't previously realized how much he should rely on God, he surely was completely reminded at this time. The signal to break camp. As soon as the mourning period of 30 days for Moses was over, Joshua gave orders to his officers to make an announcement to the people. Be prepared on notice to break camp within 3 days, the officers told the surprised people. Prepare extra food and supplies for a sudden trip over the Jordan and into the land promised to us by God. Although manna was still the main food of the Israelites, it wasn't something that could be gathered during a sudden movement of the people, or a food that could be kept long except over the Sabbath. At this time, when Israel was going to be on the move for a few days, it was necessary to prepare meat, fruits, and grains taken in their conquests that could be carried and consumed at any time. Joshua then spoke to the heads of the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh, who had by this time returned from settling their families east of the Jordan, to remind them of their promise to their brethren in the other tribes. I want to remind you of your promise to send the best soldiers of your tribes to help take over all of Canaan, Joshua told them. We'll be moving across the Jordan very soon, and your picked soldiers should lead the way, since they will not have their families with them. After we have taken the land, your warriors shall be free to return to their towns and families on this side of the river. Joshua chapter 1 verses 12 through 15. We are sending the best of our soldiers to fight in God's battles, the leaders replied. We shall carry out our promise. Our soldiers will go wherever you send them and will obey every command. Every soldier that we send will know that if he fails to obey you, he will have severe punishment. Just west of Israel's camps was the Jordan River. It was exceedingly deep, as the flood season had just begun. Only about 6 miles further to the west was a walled and fortified city called Jericho. Joshua knew that it would be necessary to attack that city before progressing further into Canaan, because it was situated by the pass that led through the mountains. It was also one of the Canaanite cities God had commanded Israel to completely destroy because of its extremely evil practices. Israelite spies sent to Jericho. Joshua realized that God wasn't necessarily going to protect Israel if any foolish moves were made. He knew that he was to use sound judgment and strategy. Because of this, he had already sent 2 men to Jericho to try to find out how well the city was armed, the condition of the walls and the gates, what forces were close to Jericho, and the morale of the people within the city. These 2 men quickly found how difficult it was to cross the Jordan at this time of year. It was spring, and showers had swollen the stream into a muddy torrent. Very few swimmers could cross a raging turbulent river in flood stage, but these men had been chosen for their many outstanding abilities, including their great skill in swimming, and they managed to get across the river and onto the west bank. After drying their clothes, which were chosen to appear as those of roving Canaanites to blend in, They trudged the several miles from the river to the city. Jericho was surrounded by groves of palm trees, and well-traveled roads led to its many gates. The Israelites met several people on the first road they came to, but no one seemed particularly friendly. Some were even a little suspicious of their identity. There was no problem in getting inside Jericho. Its huge gates were open to traffic until sunset. The Israelites mixed in with a caravan that was entering the nearest gate, and then boldly walked about to view the life and activity of this habitation of the enemy. Jericho wasn't a tremendously large city. It covered only about 7 acres. But it was compact and had room for thousands of people. Within its 4 strong walls were many busy streets crammed with stables, shops, public buildings, homes, and inns. Many shops, homes, and inns were built inside of the double walls. People milled about everywhere. From the people's expressions and actions, it wasn't difficult to see that most of them were in a state of excited anxiety. A few soldiers huddled in groups on the street, but most of them were on the walls. The Israelite scouts noted that they were gazing mostly to the east, toward the camps of Israel. The spies are trapped. Hoping to get on the wall, the Israelites walked up a long flight of steps to one of the inns built inside the wall. The owner greeted them cordially and saw to it that they were well fed, and while eating they were startled by a loud noise. The owner, her name was Rahab, explained that it was sundown and the huge gates of the city were being closed for the night, to keep anyone from going out or coming in. The 2 Israelite men suddenly realized that they were trapped, at least until sunrise. A little later, officers sent by the king of Jericho arrived at that same inn and demanded of the servant to speak with Rahab. The Israelites were just finishing their meal in another room and didn't see the officers. However, they could hear all that was said, and so could Rahab. "We have been sent here by the king of Jericho," the officers announced to the servant at the door. "He has received information that 2 Israelite spies were seen entering this inn, and we are here to arrest them."